Welcome to the Canyon Springs Commute. We've taken the last month or so to walk in Jesus' footsteps. And last week we talked about Jesus' last words to his disciples. And today I want to focus on his very last words spoken from the cross. Now, for years, I've researched people's last words. And we have this idea that a person's last words are full of meaning and wisdom. But the truth is, that's rarely true. Let me just read you a couple. Now, these I think are significant. When Harriet Tubman, the famous abolitionist of the Civil War, was dying in 1913, she gathered her family around and they sang together, and her last words were, "Swing low, sweet chariot." That's significant. These, not so much. Murderer James Rogers was put in front of a firing squad in Utah and asked if he had a last request. He replied, "Bring me a bulletproof vest." Here's a good one. Richard Mellon and his brother Andrew had a little game of tag going that lasted 7 decades. When Richard was on his deathbed, he called his brother over and he whispered, "Last tag." Poor Andrew remained it for 4 years until he died. Now, some famous last words are meaningful, some are just silly, but most of them aren't significant. Most are simply last thoughts without meaning. For example, when Frank Sinatra died, his last words were, "I'm losing it." Most people's last words are like that. Let's take a moment to look at Jesus' last words. Before we do, let me give you some context. As I read these last moments of Jesus' life, try to take in all that Jesus endured for us. This is from Matthew 26. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you would come at me with swords and clubs to capture me?" Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. They all left. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." "You have said so," Jesus replied. "He is worthy of death," they answered. Then they spit in his face and they struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, "Prophesy to us, Messiah. Who hit you?" The governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium, and they gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him, they put a scarlet robe on him, and they twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him, and they mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him. They took the staff, and they struck him on the head again and again. And after they mocked him, they took off the robe, they put his own clothes on him, and they led him away to crucify him. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, these are Jesus' second to last words, and they're significant. But what do they mean? Now, there are some people that believe that in this moment, Jesus lost his faith, that God had turned his back on his son. But I don't believe that's what's going on here. The national songbook of Israel was the Book of Psalms. Every Jew knew these songs, but in those days, the Psalms were not numbered. They were known by their first line, and that line served as a title. You know how when somebody sings the first few lines of a song, you instantly remember the rest? Let me help you understand. I've got to get a little help here from my buddy Kyle. You ready, Kyle?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm a cowboy on a steel horse I ride. I'm wanted, dead or alive. We better stop right there. You know, when you hear that, your mind goes to the next part of the song. Well, when Jewish people heard the line, my God, why have you forsaken me?" they would remember Psalm 22 because it's the first line of Psalm 22. Now, my suggestion is you should take time this week to read it because it sounds like it was written by an eyewitness of the crucifixion, but it was actually written over 1,000 years before Jesus. Let me read you just a few verses. "All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. I am poured out like water, and all of my bones are out of joint. A pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. They divide my clothes among them, and they cast lots for my garment. Psalm 22 predicts a dozen details of Jesus' death 1,000 years before it happens. Jesus isn't saying that God no longer loves him and he's lost his faith. He's pointing to a psalm that details his life. And this is how that psalm ends. The last line is, he has done it. Another way to translate that phrase is, it is finished. Those were Jesus' last words on earth, and those are significant. What he is saying is that his work on earth is done. His goal was to take on all of our sin, nail it to a cross so that we can be set free. In this moment, that plan is finished. He has done it. Because of that moment, this is what Jesus has to say to you today. All those mistakes from your past, it's finished. All that guilt you carry around, it's finished. All those decisions that you've made that you can't forgive yourself for, it is finished. I have done it. I have paid the price for you. There is nothing that you can do to pay the price more than what Jesus has already done for you. So here's my challenge. As you go through your day, my guess is your mind will take you to a place of guilt or shame or regret sometime during this day. And when that happens, say this to yourself, it is finished. He has done it.